so they had me pegged to be an AM, an aircraft mechanic. And I guess through all the paperwork I'd filled out with my background strictly in photography didn't mean anything at that point. So I was walking to my first day to report to the training, and walking down the road on the way there, I noticed a sign said photo section. And so I made a detour and went in there and talked to the lieutenant in charge, and told him my background, and asked him what the story was on the photo section. And he says, well, I can really use you here. He says, I'm the officer in charge, but I don't know anything about photography. And so I went on to my class, and then that next day I was transferred into the photo lab, and which was interesting, you know, doing work. And then he had a lot of other people in there that basically most of them knew nothing about photography. So immediately I was teaching them how to do the processing in the lab and how to run the cameras. They had good equipment, professional cameras, speed graphics. And so I stayed in there, I can't remember the exact period of time, but I remember I had an assignment to go out the airstrip. We had a general flying in from Washington, D.C. to do an inspection. And so I was out there and shooting the general, getting off the plane, and viewing the troops and that sort of thing. And I noticed a photographer was with him, come from Washington, D.C. And I got closer to him, and I realized that he had gone to the same high school and the same photo class, except he was 2 years ahead of me. So I didn't know him real well, but yeah, he kind of knew me, and so we got into a conversation, and he says, you know, there's a motion picture unit being formed out in Hollywood. He says, you know, would you consider maybe going out there if it could be worked out? And I said, well, certainly, that'd be nice to go back home, you know. And it was a matter of less than 30 days, and orders came through, and sending me out there, transferring me there, and it was a Hal Road Studios, and they were set up to do training films for the now Army Air Corps, and also some of the Army deals. And with my background in still photography, they made assignments for me and sent me around the country doing stories at various air bases. And matter of fact, my photos that I took in the stories wound up in Flying Magazine, and that's a magazine that's still being published today. So it survived all those years. But then one day, I just come back, I think it was from Luke Field in Arizona, and talking to somebody, he said, you know, there's an outfit we're hearing rumors about that might be going to China. And there, you know, to be a photographic deal. And that was the end of the conversation, and I got to thinking about it. Gee, that'd be something, you know, go to China, the other side of the world. And so then I went in and asked permission to speak to the adjutant of the base, and that turned out to be Ronald Reagan, who of course later became president. But at that time he was a captain, and so I went in and reported to Captain Reagan and said, you know, I heard rumors that there might be a small unit going over to China, and I'd sure like to be involved if that's the case. And he says, well, what do you know about photography? And so I gave him my background and said, well, you're well qualified, but he says, you know, young man, he says, you really got a nice situation here. You got a bunk here on Soundstage 5, and your parents just live a couple miles down the road, and you get to see them weekends when you're in town. And he says, you know, you could probably spend the war right here. You think you'd really want to ship out? And I said, oh yeah. And he says, well, now of course this is still a rumor, but he says, why don't you talk to your parents this weekend and come back Monday and let me know what they think. If they approve of this in their minds, well, I'll see if there's any truth to this. So of course I went home that weekend, came back Monday morning. I'd never discussed anything with my parents. Wasn't about to do that. But I had two older brothers that were already in the service and overseas.
Do you suspect you would have got resistance from your parents because of that fact?
Yeah, I'm sure they would have said that's enough for the family, you just stay here. So I reported to Captain Reagan and said, oh gosh, yeah, my family was delighted, they think that'd be a great thing for me. And so I deceived the future president of the United States, flat out lied to him.